All right, here's my audience for today's speech. Okay, so how many of you have heard of the idea that journalism is a dying profession?
I have.
Okay, so a fair amount of us have heard that notion before. It's something that's come up a lot here recently. But contrary to popular belief, journalism and people accessing news continues to be strong. People are still interested in getting their news. The way they may get that news has changed over time, but I'll go into that a little bit later. And as a news major here at Ball State, as someone who's interested in going into this field, you want to know that this is a field that's going to sustain you through your life, that this kind of a job is something that you'll be able to have down the road. And I can tell you that after studying these trends in multiple classes, journalism continues to be strong and people want their news. Now, specifically today, I'll be talking about the percentage of people who say they get news in some form every single day. I'll also be talking about television news and the number of people who say they get news through that avenue. And then, like I said before, I will be talking quite a bit about online and social media platforms for people to access their news. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you this poll. This was done by the Pew Research Center, and it is taken a poll of people and asked them how many of them actually get news on a regular basis. Now, this poll suggests that these are all the different forms of ways that people get their news, but the one stat that I found most interesting, and it's probably the hardest to see because it's way down at the bottom, it says 1% of people do not get news in any way. That means the other 99% of people are still continuing to get news. So that's my first point, right there in a nutshell. I wanted to make that one point so that we could see just how many people are still continuing to get news on a daily basis. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the main sources of news, television. Now, as you can see here, another poll, 80% of people who say they watch news watch television news. So they're not watching it on a mobile device, they're not watching it on a laptop, they are actually watching on the television. So that's a pretty significant number. Now, this trend is the amount of revenue that comes from local television news. Now, as you can see here, it has stayed pretty consistent. The only one that has gone down significantly is late night news, but every other form over the last decade has continued to stay around where it is, which is around $20 million per affiliate. So that's still a significant chunk. Now, another thing that I'm going to show you is the number of people who actually watch television news. Once again, that continues to be high. As you can see here, again, the only one that's really gone down is late night news. Every other one has continued to stay relatively steady. Now, one of the other things that I'd like to show you are the salaries of people who are working in newsrooms. So as you can see, and I found this very surprising, like I said, as someone going into the business, a lot of these people have had their salaries increase over the last 3 years. So that's another very interesting statistic that I found, and it suggests that people are continuing to make money off of the news industry, especially in local news. So my third point today is talking about that form of media that we all know very well, social media. Everyone uses social media, right? Are all of you guys on social media? Yeah, so we're all on social media in some form. So that shows that we are constantly using that outlet. Now, again, in another Pew Research poll, 2/3 of adults that were polled said they got their news from social media. So that suggests that even if they're not watching television news, even if they're not reading a newspaper or getting news on a website, they are getting news from social media. So that's a pretty significant number. That number has gone up to 72%, or it was at 72% in 2016. That is up 18% from 2013, so a substantial difference there. Again, one of the other things that I want to show is the different platforms of social media. So as you can see here, just last year, Twitter, 74% of people on Twitter were getting news through that social media site. And as you can see, that is up 15% from 2016. So obviously we don't have numbers for 2018. You can assume based on this trajectory that things will continue to increase because as more people continue to get on these platforms, they're naturally going to get more information as they use them. Okay, and again, this is another study that Pew did. And they asked people every 2 hours if they had consumed news within that 2-hour time frame. And if they had, what platforms they had used to get news. 36% of people said they had used a news organization's website or its app to access that news. 35% of people said that they were using social media to get that news. So again, as we look here, it's not television news. It's not newspapers. It is websites. It is social media. Those are the platforms that people are using to get their news. So once again, I'm just going to recap briefly here. People still get news. The news industry is not dying. A lot of people like to tell you that it is, and a lot of people like to tell you that it's struggling. But as we saw from these graphics and these statistics, the business at a local level is doing just fine. People are continuing to get that news and continue to be interested in getting that news. Like I said, 57% of people say they get their news from television. So that's a substantial amount. The largest amount of people polled said that is the way they get their news. Mobile news, as I said, is the next big wave in journalism. There are a lot of people, over 2/3 of adults, say that is how they get their news. It's not a fluke. It is here to stay. The news is an important element of life for almost every American citizen. And anyone who tries to say that it is dying is making a severe exaggeration. All right, so that's my speech for today. And here's my audience one more time.